So simply put, enterprise UX is all about designing applications for employees. It deals with making the internal systems people use to do their jobs easy and effective to use. So it may actually surprise some of you to discover that every employee is in fact a person in their own right, with their own personal digital lives. They go online to do their shopping, watch YouTube videos, pay taxes, and doom scroll social media. In other words, they're all consumers of digital services. Now, as consumers, we have a pretty good idea, all of us, what makes for a good user experience, whether an app or a site looks good, whether it's easy to understand and to use, or if it feels fast and responsive. We also have very high standards when it comes to UX in our personal lives. Research shows that consumers are breathtakingly quick to abandon a service we perceive as slow, frustrating, or unintuitive. That's why providers of consumer-facing digital services pour a lot of time and money into understanding the wants and needs of their end users and polishing up the experience accordingly. They know that they're not going to get that monthly subscription money out of you without providing a first-class UX. So, if we're all such connoisseurs of user experience as consumers, why does that change as soon as we find ourselves in the workplace? Now, enterprise systems have a bit of a reputation for being hard to use, and in many cases, that is a well-earned reputation. But why haven't providers of digital services for employees put as much time and effort into polishing their UX as their consumer-grade ones do? And really, it's all a matter of incentives. As consumers, each individual holds the power of the purchasing decision themselves. So if a service doesn't feel good to use, they won't spend money on it. That changes when those individuals become employees. The purchasing decision is made by their CTO or their IT manager instead, and they don't necessarily care about whether a system has good user experience. Enterprise users, in effect, are a captive audience, and great. A gold-plated consumer-grade UX is wonderful to have, but do you know what's better? Keeping your job. So it follows that providers of enterprise systems are incentivized to devote their time to things which are more attractive to those decision makers, rather than taking the time to understand the needs of actual users. So it's worth pointing out that most of the tasks we're looking to complete in enterprise services are a lot more complex than their consumer-grade equivalents. As a consumer, most of my user journeys consist of watching 80s music videos and buying halloumi cheese online. However, a typical enterprise user journey could be anything from relationship management and logging sales leads, all the way up to outlining technical specs for national infrastructure. As a rule, a UX feels better the less you have to think, and the more you can do just based on immediate recognition and intuitive understanding. Unfortunately, we can't always avoid thinking at work, so our perception of the user experience will necessarily suffer as a result. So we've clarified what enterprise UX is, and we understand why it tends to be a bit of an afterthought. So why am I here, and why do we care about enterprise UX at all? Well, enterprise UX is important because it directly impacts business performance. All enterprise platforms have a UX. We can't avoid that. And if it's bad, then that comes with an implicit business cost. And if we take the time to do it well, then it presents opportunities for better performance too. So what do I mean by this? It's probably best explained through an example. And we can take one of the simplest and most common examples to illustrate the case of the drop-down menu, or also known as the select control. Say, for example, we're capturing details about a sales opportunity. Our scenario is that we're entering details about a conversation we might have had with a prospective client. And we decide that when we enter the opportunity data into the system, we also want to capture details about the type of product our customer is interested in. So let's suspend judgment just for a second and imagine we've completely ignored user experience for this task. We've taken those database values for all of the different Oracle products we have in the database, and we've just thrown them into a drop-down to choose from. So what can we see when we try to use this drop-down? Well, firstly, we can see that the list of options is far too long. That's why a user has to scroll up and down, spending far too much time scanning the list to find that option that they're looking for. When we find this kind of issue during research, what we typically observe with users is that they'll simply select the first option which kind of matches, close enough, rather than a precise match. And will often lapse into selecting a nothing option or a get out clause just to make sure that required field is populated, like not applicable or other, if that's available. The second thing we notice is that the options are full of jargon and technical terminology. This might not be appropriate for our sales user. who may not have spent time studying the technical documentation for all those product definitions. If the user doesn't even understand what they're looking at, this makes it even less likely that they'll take the time to figure out the right option. So, where can we see a business impact from this admittedly small and relatively common UX problem? Well, first of all, we can see that the user is going to find it hard to select the right value, meaning that the data quality of our opportunities is impacted. When we come to report on sales performance down the line, we won't be able to produce accurate insights on the kinds of opportunity we might be performing well or badly on, potentially missing out on business or even letting weaknesses in our offering go unrecognized. Downstream in the process, once those opportunities turn into contracts, hopefully, we don't have an accurate picture of the products involved, so we won't be able to accurately forecast for resource allocation or plan for the skills mix that we'll need for that project. We can't proactively identify the challenges where we might struggle to resource an upcoming project either. Secondly, we can see that it's going to take the user a little bit longer than it should to complete this process. Now, that might not be too big a problem in this case, but where we've got those high volume use cases like back office data entry, that additional time results in efficiency losses. So clearly, this is a really simple example, but the point here is that across a whole enterprise system, multiplied across a whole workforce, these impacts really do add up, and they can result in lost business and poor efficiency of use. But the inverse is also true. So spending some time to understand our users' needs and their preferences means we can design frictionless, intuitive experiences which promote high data quality and great efficiency in use.